Hey, buddy, it's Rick here on Saturday, 11 February, day before the Super Bowl. This is sports talk, and I want to debunk something that I think is quite comical and frustrating. It comes from today's sports fans in all four major sports. Football is the biggest one, the biggest culprit for some reason, but all four major sports, where this mentality is that we have to say who's the best all the time. This one's the best, that one's the best. And we further had this criterion only today, because I'm 58 years old. Let me tell you something. It wasn't like this years ago. The criterion is you're only the best or very good if you won a lot of championships. If not, you're tear down. I'm here to tell you that's a bunch of bullshit. Okay, I don't know who started that stuff, but it's not true. There's a lot. Let me tell you something. Yes, I'm going to talk about football, Tom Brady. I'm going to talk about Dan Marino. I'm going to talk about basketball, LeBron, Michael Jordan. I'm going to talk about Bobby Orr in hockey. I'm going to talk about different people in baseball. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to prove to you that's a bunch of shit. Okay? Now, these people I mentioned are all excellent. And yes, a great player will elevate his team, everything else being equal. But nobody wins in their own. There's a lot of factors involved. There's coaching. There's players around you. Nobody wins it on their own. A lot of people get caught in good circumstances, others in bad, that could change everything. So this stuff about this one's better than that one. Look, let's start with football, because that's the biggest one that drives this train. Fans of football. It's annoying on board. So this one's the GOAT. First of all, football is much different than it was when I grew up. When I grew up, I was 70s, 80s, and 90s. It is much different. I'm not necessarily saying it's better, because I don't think that it is. But that's my opinion. I've gone into that before. But it's different. And if you've been around as long as me and you say it's not different, you're lying to yourself. It's a very different game. For a lot of reasons. The rules have changed over the years, especially around in the 2000s. They wanted to make offense prolific. They've made the quarterbacks have an easier time. It's well stated by a lot of people on television. Free agency and the salary cap have made teams not nearly as deep as they used to be, because you had dynasties that stayed forever. It's a very different type of game. So when you start trying to say this quarterback has better stats than back in the 70s and 80s, well, yeah, it's a different era. In the 70s, it was primarily a running. You threw for 200 yards in a game in the 70s. That was a lot. Now you can do it in the first half. It's a very different game. It was very difficult to have a 60% passer rating. Most never did in the 70s. You look at the top one, 58%, 56%. That's garbage nowadays, because the rules have changed to make it quarterback friendly. Of course, you're going to have better stats and more yards. So when I start seeing, this comparing different eras, what we should say is this guy, Brady, was the best of this era. Montana, the best of that era. You can say that, but this stuff, he's got to be the best. You're crossing eras. It's very difficult to say that, because you don't know how these players... And I'm tired of hearing, everybody's so much better of an athlete nowadays. Really? Tell me one running back that's better than Barry Sanders right now. Travis Henry might have, but he's near the end. But he's a different type of runner, and he's more of a power. But tell me one that's better than Barry Sanders. Tell me you have Walter Payton, Tony Dorsett, and some of those great, Eric Dickerson. There's better running backs right now. Tell me there's a better receiver than Jerry Rice out there right now. There's an equivalent, but better. Okay? Tell me there's a better front line than the Pittsburgh Steelers had in the 70s. I'm not talking about one guy in a team. I'm talking about a front line. A team that has 4 front lines like them. Nobody does. So I'm tired of hearing how they're so much better and all this and that. It's different. Much, much different. Also, this stuff about if you win more rings, it automatically makes you better. Really? Do you know the circumstances that go in? Let me prove how stupid that is. Okay. Let's start with basketball, because that's a big one. If you want to go by that criterion, so Michael Jordan is better than LeBron. He's at 6 championships to 4. I prefer Michael Jordan for a lot of other reasons, but not for that. For a lot of other reasons. But that's for a different conversation. But if we're going to go just by that, the best player ever was Bill Russell. Why? He has 11 championships. He has more than LeBron and Michael Jordan combined. They have 10 combined, 6 and 4. So if you want to go by that criterion that sports fans like to put out today, the amount of championships you win makes your status, then Bill Russell is the best player of all. And I don't think that he is. I'm not saying I wasn't around during them, but the Boston Celtics of that era were outstanding. I think there was I think Wilt Chamberlain was a more effective center than him. But he didn't have the Boston Celtics. He didn't have Sam Jones, Bob Cousy. They were great teams back then. But if you want to go by that criterion everybody puts all the time, if you win more championships, then Bill Russell, hands down, is the best. Robert Horry has 7 championships. I guess he's better than Michael Jackson and Larry Bird, and who has 3, and Magic Johnson, who has 5. I guess Robert Horry is the second best player because he has 7 championships. Robert Horry was a very good player. He was more of a role player, very much a sixth man. And he went around different teams, fell into good situations. He was helpful to those teams. And he won 7 championships with different teams. But he was nothing like Michael Jordan or LeBron or any of this play. And he would never say that he is, but he has 7 rings. Therefore, he must be better than these other players, according to the criterion that's put out nowadays. The ridiculous criterion that rings make you better than everybody. I just use an example. Robert Horry, 7 rings. And he's better than Larry Bird, who had 3. Nobody would say that. Nobody would say that. Baseball. One of the best hitters ever was Ted Williams, the splendid splinter. I don't care. Obviously, I'm from Boston. I like the Red Sox, but I don't care if you do or you don't. That man is considered one of the best purest hitters that ever played the game. You know how many championships he has? 0. Joe DiMaggio was his big rival during that time. Very similar, considered a great hitter. Ted Williams is actually considered the best pure hitter, even more than him, but Joe DiMaggio is considered one of the best baseball players totally in all field and everything combined. Matter of fact, there's such a comparison between them. They were actually, at one time, the Red Sox and the Yankees were thinking of swapping them because they figured that DiMaggio would be better for Fenway and Williams better for the Yankee Stadium. They didn't, of course. You know how much DiMaggio has for championships? He has 10. Ted Williams has 0. So is DiMaggio 10 times better than Ted Williams? Of course he's not. I don't think anybody would say that he's better. They're considered very equal. But one has 10 championships and one has 0. Why is that? Because the Yankees were better than the Red Sox. The Red Sox were good, but the Yankees were better. That great dynasty. They simply were better. And DiMaggio was part of that. That's why he's got 10. It's not because he's better than Ted Williams. Because he had a better team. 10 rings to 0. But nobody that I've ever says DiMaggio is that much better than Williams. Because he's not. So this mentality of rings. Let's go back to football. Dan Marino has no rings. My era, one of the best quarterbacks ever. I've seen him. He could fit in today with this fast-paced passing game with no problem. In '84, one of the best seasons ever. I consider the best season. The first guy over 5,000 yards in a different era than today. He did more than quarterbacks are doing today in an era where it's tougher. Now, he never won a Super Bowl. Why is that? Was he a choker? No. He had, except for the first year in '83 when he came in, he went 12-4 that first year. Starting the next year, when they went 14-2, that great year, he never had a defense in the top half of the league, ranked. And he never had a 1,000-yard rusher or a decent running game, which 1,000-yard rushers were big during that era. You don't have to have them today, but they were big during that era. Never had a running game that was anywhere near championship level. Never had a defense that was near. That's why they used to always lose to the Bills. They'd win 11, 12 games in the 90s. They'd lose to the Bills because the Bills had a running game and a better defense and a better coach. Don Shula was a great coach through the 70s, but he failed to do anything but nurture Marino in his passing. And a lot of it had to do with him. He never had a defense. He never brought in a bulky, beefy defense. Never established a running game for Marino, and then became all Dan Marino, and he could only do so much against other teams that were better. When Marino went to the only Super Bowl, did he choke? No, he played Montana, who was 15-1. To this day, the best record between two teams, a 14 and 15 win team. Montana was equally as good as Marino, and he had a better defense and better running game, and therefore they beat the Dolphins. Nobody was going to beat the 49ers that year. They lost in overtime by 3 points to the Steelers. That's how close they came to being unbeaten that year. But Marino has no rings. Hall of Famer, no problem. But Trent Dilfer in 2000 with the Baltimore Ravens, one of the best defenses ever, has a ring. Who remembers Trent Dilfer? Who cares? He was so insignificant that when they won the Super Bowl, next year the Ravens cut him. They cut a Super Bowl quarterback because they knew it wasn't him. But he's got one ring and Marino has none. I guess he's better than Marino, right? According to the pundits. Eli Manning has 2 rings. Is he better than Marino? Oh, I don't think so. 2 rings, and he deserved those 2 rings. Great playoff runs. They were 10-6 and 9-7 respectively in those 2 years they won. They weren't even great. 8 perfect games he played. Don't get me wrong, but you take that away, his career was at best average. I don't even think he's worth the Hall of Fame. There's been a lot of talk about it. I don't think he is, because he had so many other years of mediocrity. But he won 2 Super Bowls and was the MVP. Is he better than Marino because he got 2 and Marino's none? I don't think anybody would say that he is. I certainly wouldn't. But these birds here with this criterion of you winning those Super Bowls, it means you. There's a lot of factors involved. Coaching. Look at Dallas. Dallas has a very good core team, especially in defense. I'm not crazy about Prescott. But that is such a dysfunctional organization because of their owner and the coaches. He always brings in these clown, half-ass coaches. Look at Tom. Let's take Tom Brady. A lot of you out there are not going to like what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it, and I've said it before. I love Tom Brady. I've done nothing but compliment him. Brady was very lucky when he came in. He was nothing in college. There's a reason why he was a 6th-round draft pick. He was skinny. His Columbine numbers sucked. He didn't have much of an arm when he first came in, and he was a 6th-round draft pick. Nobody cared about him. Nobody even knew he was. He was supposed to, but he came in 2000 when Belichick was hired. Didn't play much the first year, but chewed it under Brady. Got his chance in the second year when he had 1 year under his belt in that system. And with a solid defense and dink and dunking his way through, because the first couple of years he wasn't a prolific thrower. You don't believe me? Go check the stats. They won. With the help of a tuck rule, of course, but we won't go into that. Okay? Tom Brady was very lucky to go to that system. He was supposed to go to the Cleveland Browns. I don't know if you want to know that, who was in their second year and extremely dysfunctional at that time. Tom Brady goes to the Cleveland Browns with that carousel of coaches they had and dysfunctionality. He gets beaten to shit, and you probably wouldn't even know who he is right now. But he went to the best organization you could possibly go at the best time and get nurtured. I'm not saying he's not a great quarterback. I'm not saying that at all. He became a great quarterback. But early on, if you look at the first couple of years, the first 2 years they won the Super Bowl, his stats were very pedestrian. The team didn't even score a lot of points. The defense was number 1. In 2003, when they won the Super Bowl, the second time, they had the number 1 defense that year. Their offense was way low in the charts. Didn't matter. They would win 9-6, 17-14. He didn't have to do a lot. Because that system, Belichick, I don't like Belichick personally. I think he's a piece of shit, but that's beside the point. I don't have to like him, but I have to respect him. He's a great coach. And he nurtured and took Brady under his wing and was a chief reason why that man became what he is. But if Brady goes to the Browns, a very different tale to tell probably comes out of that. He wasn't the natural talent that Manning was coming out of college, who no matter where he went would have been a gunslinger. He wasn't like that. Brady had to be nurtured, and then he became great. But he had a great coach, the best of the era. Look at Archie Manning. Archie Manning was a solid quarterback. People don't realize the father of Peyton Manning, and he played for the worst organization that ever existed, the 1970 Saints. You could have put the second coming of Jesus Christ in that team, they wouldn't have won. They were terrible. Numerous coaching changes, no defense, a joke. Nobody wanted to show up for their games. And he stuck with them through the entire decade and beyond a little. Despite taking beatings, as well known, he was a solid player. You put Roger Staubach in that team or Fran Tarkenton, they wouldn't have done much better. It was just terrible. There's a lot of factors. Staubach was great in the 70s. He also had Tom Landry in a great, at that time, organization, not like it is today. A great organization of stability. There's a lot to be said about that. People start talking about, this guy won champ, as if he does it by himself. Nobody does it by himself. Even Brady. 2 years ago when he went to Tampa, you think he went to a team that was terrible? You think he went to the Jets? He went to a great team that was loaded. Yes, he made a difference. Look at this year when the weapons went away. They couldn't score to save their ass. Their defense was the only reason why they won 8 games, 8-9. And then when the defense failed in the first round of the playoffs, he couldn't score because he couldn't do it all year anyways. So no matter how good you are, there's a lot of factors that comes into saying why you win rings. It's not just you alone. A lot of different eras bring out different rules change. I mean, back in the day, I'm not saying people want to do this. If you ever saw 1976, Joe Turkey Jones took Bradshaw and pummeled him, face planted him. He was out the rest of the year. He should have been prosecuted, but that was like a criminal act, I thought. But that's what they did back then. And nobody did anything. It was just a penalty, and Bradshaw was out the rest of the year until he came back for the playoffs. I'm not saying I want people to do that. I'm just saying that's what it was like. Montana was brutalized by Taylor and the Giants in the late 80s. Brutalized. These quarterbacks today, you can't fart next to them without getting a penalty. Mahomes on last Sunday, pushed a little out of bounds, flag immediately. That stuff wouldn't have happened before. It's a different mentality. So to make comparisons how this one would do and that one would do is not really right. You have to take every era and understand rules were different, mentalities were different, very different games. Instead of saying, oh, well, this one wins this many championships, he must be better than this one. Bobby Orr won 2 championships. Hockey, 2. Only 2. You know why he didn't win more than 2? Because he had the Montreal Canadiens to deal with. The late 60s into the 70s, Montreal Canadiens were one of the best dynasties to ever play the game. And he could never beat them in the playoffs. That's why he didn't win 5 or 6. That doesn't mean he's not great. But the Canadiens were better. Guy Lafleur, Ken Dryden, they simply were better than the Bruins. Had nothing to do with why Orr didn't win as many as Guy Lafleur did. He didn't win as many, but he was one of the greatest players ever. But when you played up against a dynasty like that, one man ain't going to do it. Okay? That's no knock on Orr. Still one of the best ever, even though he only has 2 championships, not 5 or 6 like Gretzky and all them. Cam Neely has none. Cam Neely for the Bruins was a solid fighter. He was a quintessential power forward. 0 championships. But Claude Lemieux has 3. Claude Lemieux was a grinder. But he went everywhere to get. He went to Montreal, went to Colorado. He went places to get cups. Cam Neely could have done that. He could have said, hey, in 92, let me pair up, trade me to Pittsburgh, Claude Lemieux. I'll get a couple cups. But he didn't. He stayed with the Bruins to the end until he couldn't play because of his knee. And he has no cups. But is he not as good as Claude Lemieux because Claude Lemieux has 3 cups? No. Patrick Roy, one of my favorite players ever. One of the better goalies of his era. Patrick Roy. Then you had Dominic Hasek and Brodeur. Now, Roy came before both of them, but still, they're kind of in the same era. A lot of people put them as the 3 best goalies of their time. But most people say that probably Hasek is probably the best. Why? Hasek didn't have a team. He had 1 year where he went to the finals. But overall, Buffalo wasn't that good. He had to stand on his head for them to win. Okay? 0 championships. Brodeur has 3. Patrick Roy has 4. So I guess Patrick Roy is automatically better than them because he has 4, and Hasek has none, so he must be much better than... No. I mean, I love Patrick Roy, but there's a lot of arguments to say the other 2 guys were as good, if not better than him. But if you want to go by this championship bullshit that everybody puts out, Patrick Roy is definitely better because he's got 4, right? That's the bottom line, right, according to everybody. Doesn't matter what team you're on or nothing, or other factors, just the fact that you got 4. I guess you did it by yourself. So this mentality that I hear, oh, I got more rings, that must mean that we've started today, is there's many people in the Hall of Fame of sports that don't have any championships. Why is that? Because they were great. You can't, if you're one of 11, or one of whatever, one of how many people start in basketball's 5, but there's bench, of course. If you're one person on a team, it's not just your responsibility to win. You have to have the right coaching. You have to have the right players around you, the right situation. And that's why there's a lot of players in the Hall of Fame that don't have championships. Because it's not just about that makes you great. Fran Tarkenton doesn't have any. One of the greatest quarterbacks, went to 3 Super Bowls, lost them all. But he played better teams. Okay? Jim Kelly, 4 straight with the Bills. They should have won the first one. It's not his fault. The guy missed a kick. Nowadays, 47-yard field goals are easy. Back then, it was a little tougher. Wide right? It's not his fault. He did what he had to do to bring them down. The next 3 Super Bowls, they just weren't as good. It wasn't that they choked. The Redskins and the Cowboys, those 2 years they played after, were better teams than Buffalo. It wasn't that Kelly choked. It wasn't that he wasn't as good as the other quarterbacks. He was as good as Rippon, or I think he was as good as Aikman. He just didn't have Emmitt Smith. He didn't have the offensive line Dallas had. They were good, the Bills, but those teams were better. And that's what happens. That doesn't dismiss how good of a quarterback that man was, because I think to bring a team 4 in a row, especially when you keep losing them, and to motivate yourself is great stuff. All right? It's easy to quit and say, oh, we're not going to do it, and we tried. No. So that's my talk for the day. It's a little long, I know, 20 minutes, but this mentality of if you win rings and this and that, you're better, and all these players are better today. Tell me one player in today that's faster than Darryl Green or Deion Sanders. All right? Or one pass rusher that's stronger than or a linebacker stronger than Lawrence Taylor in today's game. One of the best players ever. So I don't buy this stuff. They're so much better. Everybody's so much better. And we win rings. It makes you so much better. There are a lot of factors that come into play and a lot of situations that could have changed everything for different players. That's all I'm going to have to say. And I think I've shown the stats to show that some players that are lesser than others have rings because they were on good situations. They fell into situations. It doesn't make them a better player than somebody else. That's all I have to say. Rick, have a great day.